Great.
All right. I am meeting with Chrissy Pierno, our lead teacher and my mentor, to talk about, we're going to debrief the tall, short, big, and tall video that I did. And she watched it, and we're going to talk about it. So, Chrissy, when I looked at it, it was the first video I did, and it's always very hard to see yourself. And there are pros and cons. I want to give pros out too, but cons, I will say, the first thing is we had talked about, now I realize when we do a lesson, any materials that I'm going to use, hand out right before we do it. Because I was doing the whiteboards, but the whiteboards weren't used until 11 minutes into my lesson.
Right.
So now I totally realize, hand out worksheets, hand out whatever right before I do the lesson. What do you think?
Yeah, so I definitely noticed some things, but that was definitely a distraction for the kids. I think they were...
Distraction.
They were more invested in just like kind of playing what was in front of them. A way that you could do that is like have them just like stacked up next to you, showing them like, hey, today we're gonna learn about tall and short. We're gonna kind of like that overall intro, like we're gonna talk about it, we're gonna measure each other, and then we're gonna do some whiteboard work, and and then they're like, oh, okay, yeah, great.
Right.
Instead of, and just that way it's still there, or even not talk about it, but just have it there.
Right.
And that way it's just a quick like little pass out. Like all your materials kind of right there. I think that was definitely, that's good.
Yeah.
Good that you noticed
that's
that.
definitely, it's so funny because I didn't realize it, because I did it quite a bit, but hands to yourself, I kept on hearing myself say that. And again, I understand, if I had something in front of me too, and I'm 4 and 5 years old, I would touch it as well, but it's so funny because I didn't realize it at that point until you look at it.
Yeah. It was, of course, like this is just something that happens, but like the video itself was definitely a distraction.
Yes, huge distraction.
So I like the next time you do a lesson, like making sure that it's not facing the kids. And that way it's also like, I mean, they're used to pictures because that's how we kind of document and do portfolios and things, but that was definitely another little distraction for some of them. Like I'm pretty sure a couple of the kids got very little out of that just because, the turning around and your faces.
Exactly.
I think that it was great that you started by asking kind of that inquiry, like bigger picture question about like what can be tall, what can be short. I think that really gets them kind of thinking about like really tall things and really short things. Kind of like when someone's at a giraffe and then they're talking about monkeys. Like,
right.
And so like having them give examples and then having you give examples, that's like a good way to do that. And you were giving examples. You were kind of like talking them through theirs, so that's good.
Right.
And then I liked that you had like the measuring tape, you had the ruler, you had the yardstick, and you introduced it enough to like talk to use it, because like obviously like the concept of measurement in units is like something that we'll kind of touch on at the very end of the year, just as like as we measure our plants, you know what I mean? But less so. But I think it was just like for the purposes of the lesson, I think it was good.
Should I have used? Okay, so my question to you is also, when you're with a group, and I went around to each student.
Yeah, I wrote that down.
You did?
Yeah.
And then you start losing interest on the other kids.
Yeah.
What's like the happy medium to kind of still keep them involved? Because you would hope that they would watch every kid be measured, but they don't.
Right. So, I mean, that's a lot to ask of a 4-year-old.
Right.
So I would say like that kind of lesson where you go around for every kid, you kind of need something for the others to be doing. So that when it's that turn, they kind of stop the activity and measure with you. So that it's more like once you kind of demonstrate what you're going to do, maybe they have something on the table that they're like measuring, or they're using those whiteboards. Maybe they're like, you kind of like introduce the table part, and then you know, like kind of split up so that there is still an activity, or you're having them like get up and walk. So something that I wrote down was like kind of the measuring, where is it? Yeah, what are the kids doing as they're waiting? So just kind of always thinking about that. Whether you're working with a small group, whether you're working with, I mean, that was a small group too, but those 5 other kids that didn't have anything to do at that time were definitely like, that's when the camera distraction came in, you know,
exactly.
and the whiteboards seemed so cool. So just kind of thinking about that as you're planning a lesson.
Right. I could have also maybe had them in the front of the classroom all together standing up and then measured somebody and then placed them somewhere and then measured somebody else and where do they get placed in the line. Maybe that would have been more fun rather than just sitting around a table and watching people get measured. I don't know.
Another idea that I thought too is like kind of leaving the room. So I know like a lot of what we do is in the class, but I mean, if you went in the hallway and you gave them all a little ruler and like that's kind of how you measured it out, or I mean, and I don't mean to like if you were like kind of in this just how I think if you changed like the lesson a little bit so that they had to get up and go somewhere and come back and tell us about. Then they're all sitting there waiting to tell you about what happened, right? Instead of, well, that you kind of get that buy-in, that investment that they have, like, because these kids love to share. Like, they look for their shares every week. So, like, their favorite thing to do is like, wait to tell us something. So, like, that might be a good way to still not have to have them do something, but like, they all just did something great and they all have something to share now. And just kind of like in those little ways.
Or go outside and see like the big buildings and the shorter buildings and really use the area we have around us.
Exactly. Or like look around the room, notice something tall and draw it, notice something small and draw it. And then, while you're drawing, I'm going to come around and talk to a couple kids and maybe like you'd stop halfway and check in and then give them a separate like, okay, now I want you to draw something long, or something that is big, not just tall, and then you could go around. So just kind of like thinking through like what the other kids are doing while you're trying to keep the lesson going. There's a lot to juggle.
Right. There's a lot to juggle. Keep their attention span. That's a major one.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
It was really helpful to do that, to see it.
Yeah.
Helpful to hear what you have to say as well. All right.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, I thought the kids enjoyed it. Like overall, they love working in that little small group. So
that was helpful. I really enjoyed the small group. Yeah, because I could have done I could have not done with the whole class. I would have totally changed that. I could have measured everybody, so I would have.
But it was your first one. I thought you did great.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. All right.
Okay.